All right. Hello, hello. We are back on the House in Fata Morgana. Happy Friday. Hopefully, everyone had a decent week. As you can tell, I had such a good week. I forgot what time management is. So apologies for starting late, but that was sarcastic, by the way. It's been a long week. But we are here now. It is the weekend, and let's go ahead and recap. So, our new journey starts with us living with Giselle in the house and her trying to make us a better conversationalist. We asked about our ages 20 and 27. Her poor family, she wants an Oniitan, and our family is traitorous. Our preferences, she likes himbos, and we liked our brother's noble fiance, Amy. And how enjoyable it is to live in the house with us. She admitted she was forcing her cheer back in the village, but it's more genuine here because we have childlike sincerity. Michael reflected on how closed off he was to Giselle and reticent about his feelings. Then we awoke in a chair with blood, painting the house, and came across the tower's chain door with 3 keyholes. We woke up Painting Dude to ask for keys, but he just stuttered that the keys are connected to the witch's past with the 3 men from the other stories and apologized to us for something. We picked the doors in the wrong order first to get those endings and got destroyed, leaving Giselle vulnerable, succumbing to the witch's hatred. Then we went to the Rose Garden to ask Phantom Mel for his key, getting misidentified as Michelle/Abby, and promising to free him from Morgana despite our uncertainty. He made us reach through a thorny bush for a key that he already had on him. Yeah, that little bitch. Gonna fight him next time I see him. He asked us to do something nice for Nellie on his behalf and warned that the next keys are tougher. Phantom Yukimasa was hostile, but just handed us the key and told us to get out. In the den, we found Giselle lifeless again and relived the bad ending, but this time we knew it was fake because the real Giselle can't bleed. Phantom Jacopo shot us in the head point blank and tried to make us take him with us from Morgana, but faded away and dropped his key. We opened the door and climbed the stairs to Morgana, who misses the hopelessness we used to have. On the endless staircase, we asked Morgana what her deal is, and she claimed to be an ordinary human that started as little more than a ghost like us in this afterlife. But we still want Giselle back and demanded to know Morgana's story for her sake. She warned that we will feel her pain if she shares her story and merged consciousness with us. So yeah, we're about to find out what Morgana's story is. And I have a feeling that it is going to be tragic because, well, everyone's story's been tragic so far, but I'm very curious about what her beef is with some of these dudes. So, okay. We are starting off weird, I see. I carry within me the child of God. That is where it all began. I feel like I said it and then like the choir came. It was a moment. It was something. It's been a long week. That is where it all began. The words of one foolish woman determined the course of my entire life. Before I was even born, my fate was decided. Did her claim come from faith? Was it her way of escaping reality? Did she do it for money? Or fame? I don't know. I have been visited by an angel of the Lord. They are all kind of dicks, so it is not that hard to imagine why she hates them. The one that I'm really curious about is Mel, I think. But he is kind of a dick. So, like, Yukimasa, I mean, he was murdering people. I can see maybe where that one happened. And Jacopo's Jacopo. So, Jacopo really didn't get better through his. He just learned about the consequences of his actions. So, sorry, dude. The village where she lived had suffered from years of poor harvest. It had been months since the last rain, and all the villagers prayed desperately to be blessed with succor. I am with child, though I have known no man. So proclaimed the pregnant woman in the midst of the drought. And on the day of my birth, the very moment I let out my first cry, a heavy rain fell down upon the village. The storm quenched the parched earth, nourishing the crops and saving the village. The villagers were astounded, for they had thought that the drought would never end. As plump drops of rain poured down upon the village, they gathered around newborn me in exultation. Ah, she's the child of God! Perhaps there would be more wonder in claiming I had magical powers. Perhaps it would make a better story if I were to say there were higher forces involved. But all these years later, here is what I truly think. It was nothing more than a fluke, an improbable stroke of luck, an unbelievably fortunate accident for my mother and the village, and an indescribably unfortunate accident for myself. I am with child, though I have known no man. As if that's even possible. Maybe she had fooled around with a man who had gone and abandoned her, and she spouted those lies to convince herself it had never happened. None of the village men made any claim to be my father. Perhaps he was someone else's husband, and as such, he couldn't reveal himself, as adultery is a sin in the eyes of God. The girl they were praising as the child of God was, indeed, not more than the ordinary daughter of a wretched woman. At the time, though, I thought differently. I believed my mother's words, convinced I was a saint, and it gave me a sense of duty, of purpose, rather than superiority. As the daughter of God, I believed it was my responsibility to help anyone in need. So every day, I prayed. I asked my father what I could do, what I was meant to do. Not everyone is equally good, however. There will always be someone who lends their ear to the devil's whispers. It was the Holy Spirit. One man claimed I was the daughter of a charlatan. He shouted for all to hear, "If you really are the child of God, then perform a miracle for us." Could he have been any more unreasonable? Miracles are neither magic nor parlor tricks. They are realized through the power of faith. A lowly villager has no place demanding God prove his own divinity. It is the height of arrogance. But the man refused to heed my words. So, having no other choice, I contemplated what I could do to show him I was, indeed, a saint. And blood was the spark of my inspiration. And then I turned water into wine. I fed people with one loaf of bread and like three fish or something. I've never read the Bible, and it is clear. I'm aware. Yes, the daughter of God as opposed to the son of God. Jesus had a sister. Michael, the time when I lived and the time when you lived were not so different. Our views and beliefs about the world are very much the same. So you should understand that in our time, blood was seen as unclean. I'm pretty sure it still is. Like, what exactly? When did that change? Oh, five loaves of bread and two fish. Hmm. I mean, that's it. I'd say that's even more impressive. Like, you'd think people would want more fish than bread, but bread is good, so I don't know. Um, it was a dreadful thing, ridden with diseases, which is why we drained the blood from animals and purified the flesh before consuming it. But being a saint, my blood would have been different. Like the blood of the saints who came before me, mine would be blessed. I believed it would be able to cleanse people's impurities. For my demonstration, I chose an elderly woman afflicted with a terrible disease. She was on her deathbed, and no one thought that she would live for longer than another day or two. Girl, what are you about to do? I am so scared right now. Like, what kind of wild shit did you do to this poor old dead woman? Or dying woman, I guess she's not quite dead yet. She may be, but, the woman was overjoyed when I came to visit her. Sincerely believing me to be a holy servant of the Lord, she gathered all the strength she could muster to climb from her bed and kiss my feet. I felt an intensely deep love for this woman. Placing my hands upon her cheeks, I said with all the kindness in my heart, "My beloved sister, partake of my blood." The woman agreed without a glimpse of hesitation. We now have a blood splatter on the screen, like, oh, interesting. So the blood taboo probably comes back to Hebrew culture and cleanliness rituals. I mean, to be fair, I cannot think of anything that, like, and maybe this is because I am female and menstruate, but like, I have always thought of blood like, I mean, it's a pathogen, not pathogen, it's a biohazard, not, yeah, biohazard. So like, has it ever been a clean thing? Have I just like not been in the right with the right people? Um, the woman agreed without a glimpse of hesitation, and so I pricked the tip of my finger with a knife and let the blood drip into her mouth. Within 3 days, her health had improved enough for her to get out of bed unassisted. Seeing that, no one in the village doubted my powers any longer. In fact, the man who had accused me of being the daughter of a charlatan was subsequently punished for his sins. He received much deserved retribution for challenging the daughter of God, for mocking her. But of course, being a saint, I forgave the man. He, in turn, repented and changed his ways, worshiping me as the true child of God. Now, I'll be honest with you. I was ecstatic, utterly elated. I felt like I was on top of the world and I reveled in it. The villagers showered me with adulation. They revered me, the daughter of God. Anyone who didn't was punished. And on top of that, my blood could cause miracles. Tell me, do you look down on me for feeling the way I did? The actual child of God would never let herself be consumed by such base emotions, would she? But if you would give me a chance, I would like to explain myself. I was but a young girl at the time, and to a child, her mother is the world. Anything she says is the absolute truth. So when my mother's claims so happened to coincide with a lucky miracle, my young mind was set in stone. I was a saint. My blood could heal the sick, and nothing would convince me otherwise. After all, I was but a girl of 6 years old. It is not my place to decide whether my blood truly had miraculous powers or not. If you think it did, then it did, and if you think it was all happenstance, then so it was. Miracles are brought about by faith, so the elderly woman who was healed was done so by the power of her unbelief. Baseless hope and desire can, at times, make the otherwise impossible reality. You understand just how major a role religion played in our time, don't you, Michael? Especially as someone whose life was taken from him in the name of God. And you understand how powerful word of mouth can be as well, don't you? Oh yeah, I forgot about blood of Christ being shared as Eucharist at the Eucharist. So that one makes sense. I forgot about that. Interesting. So apparently you can't be declared a saint until after you've died, but she's clearly not dead. So I mean, she's also currently kind of claiming she's not a saint. It's just all coincidence, but it didn't take long for word of the miracle performing child of God to spread. Travelers from faraway lands came to our village, all in search of aid. Driven by a mixture of elation and duty, I gave my blessings unto every pilgrim who sought them. I gave them my blood, yes. My young hands were perpetually covered in wounds. Running out of skin on my fingers, I cut the back of my hands, my palms, my wrists. Before long, they had turned into swollen, carved up black and red horrors. And so I kept them wrapped in cloth at all times. The only time I uncovered them was to give blood to those who sought it. My lacerated hands were, in no uncertain terms, gruesome and unsightly. But the believers who came to see me all wept at my selfless sacrifice. And so I came to cherish those wounds. There were some for whom no miracle took place. But whenever that would happen, the villagers would come out and say, "The daughter of God is not to blame. You simply lack sufficient faith." Thus, such incidents had no negative effect on my reputation as a saint. For 3 years, I continued doling out blessings. So from the ages 6 to 9, she basically got used as a human pincushion. Like, what the hell? One day, while I was offering a prayer, my mother let slip her discontent. "Why must you hand out miracles for nothing? Why must you give strangers grace? We should be getting compensated. We deserve remuneration. If we charged just a little bit for each blessing, we could be living so much more comfortably." I was dumbfounded. How could the mother of a saint say such things? Helping people was my divine calling, and she expected payment? I nearly wept, hearing my mother preoccupied with such worldly desires. So I explained to her how important this work was. I taught her that we were not to covet material wealth, that we were to dedicate our lives to the service of our fellow man. "You are right, my dear saint," she said, understanding. And I believed her. I fell asleep that night convinced she truly understood and that there would be no more problems. I don't think there will be, but yeah, kind of. I do. Yeah, it sounds like the reverse of the Uematsu bloodletting rituals. But the next day, I was sold off. What? Men I. What the hell? Men I had never seen before carried me by the arms and tossed me into a carriage. Confused and panicked, I stuck my head out, searching for my mother. Off in the shadow of the house, I saw her with a strange man, accepting a bag of coins. Girl, you poor thing. Interesting. So the hands being wounded might be a reference to how a guy named Thomas doubted that Jesus had risen until he put his hands through the nail holes in Jesus' hands and hips. Interesting. The carriage rocked back and forth, as it rolled along a dirt road. Shaking and bouncing within it, I struggled with overwhelming grief and despair. It was, perhaps, the first time in my life I had felt such a powerful emotion. I didn't know what I felt so much despair over, though. Obviously, it was over my present predicament, but I wasn't sure what about it hurt the most. Was it that I had been pawned off like a slave? Was it that my mother, the mother of a saint, had been blinded by money? Was it that the villagers had watched in silence as a disciple of the Lord was thrown into a carriage? Why would you just. Okay, I assumed that she was doing it where the village couldn't see. If you're. If you have someone in the village who can, like, do miracles, why would you let them just get bought off? Like, yeah, it sounds like we've got a lot of Bible references in this one. Or was it that I, daughter of God, lamented my misfortune like a mortal? I decided it was a trial. My father, the Lord God, was testing my worthiness of being his daughter. So I choked back my urge to cry and sat there in silent contemplation. For almost 3 weeks was I rocked around in the carriage. The coachman treated me well enough, but I'm certain it was only because he didn't want his precious cargo dying before he could deliver it. He did not, by any means, think me the child of God. The third week, the carriage arrived at a city. It was much larger than the village I had grown up in, with many, many more people crowding the streets. Something about them felt different, too. They all spoke in a tongue foreign to me, which is when I realized I was far, far away from home. I was delivered to the lavishly decorated mansion of the region's lord. Brightly colored flowers bloomed wildly in the garden as guests laughed and ate extravagant meals. The the rose garden? Is that where? Oh, Jesus' agony in the Garden of Gethsemane? I apologize if I just murdered that reference. And in addition to them, there were probably 4 times as many slaves moving around about the grounds. Getting a range of looks from everyone we passed, from smartly dressed men to scrawny, emaciated servants, I was led to the Lord's chambers. The Lord was surrounded by beautiful women. Perhaps they were slaves, or perhaps they were prostitutes. I couldn't tell. Among them were some girls hardly older than me. They all wore thin swaths of cloth, barely covering themselves at all. Girl, you're 9! Ugh. The Lord looked me up and down, and with a laugh, he said, "Welcome, daughter of God. You'll be performing miracles for me now." Miracles are not something to be performed for one single person's benefit, I replied, shocked and furious he had just said something so utterly blasphemous. In response, he said, "I bought you. You are my property. You have no right to an opinion." But I would not have any of it. I entreated him to give up his indulgent lifestyle and devote himself to the service of the Lord. But the more I pleaded, the deeper the creases on his face grew. Thinking back on it now, it was hardly surprising. A 9-year-old girl was scolding the most powerful man in the region. I believed it was my duty, and that I was only doing what was right, but he surely saw it as incredible arrogance. So the Lord forced his will upon me. He bound my hands and feet and cut me without my permission, filling a goblet with my blood and passing it around to his guests. Ugh. A saint's blood and good fortune to all. Another blood mark. That was when I realized the Lord was only interested in the approval of others. He reveled in their envy as he pranced about, showing off his curious new toy, me. He didn't need my miracles. Neither he nor any of his guests were afflicted with disease or misfortune. They were all richly blessed. Every time he threw a banquet, he drained me of my blood. It became nearly impossible to find a spot on either of my arms that wasn't a swollen reddish black gash. And soon, because my arms weren't providing enough blood for him, the cutting spread to my legs. I lived in a haze of half consciousness. Honestly, I'm amazed it didn't kill me, though perhaps the Lord was simply taking care not to make more than my body could spare. The Last Supper, okay. We have another reference. Watching the wealthy partygoers laugh and sip my blood through bleary eyes, another wave of despair came over me. My miracles, my blood, were not meant to be an appetizer at a feast. They were meant for the sick and the poor. But despite my wishes, the Lord persisted to squeeze me dry day in and day out for his own enjoyment. For a while, I was convinced it was all God's test, that it was part of his plan for me, his daughter, that if I could make it through this trial, I would be allowed to go back to helping people. That man would celebrate my success, envy me, worship me, that sinners would face punishment, that divine retribution would be delivered unto all who had wronged me, a saint. With each passing day, my spirit grew more twisted. Yeah, that's a good question. We wonder if this excessive bloodshed she experiences is related to Giselle not being able to bleed at all. Maybe. It does seem to, I mean, at the very least, it kind of creates a foil, right? Because I assume that we are going to get to an equal but opposite um, thing, right? You know, like Giselle starts out really cheery, trying to help everyone else. She gets betrayed by the villagers, um, and then has her moment. And we're kind of watching Morgana do a similar thing. So, would anyone have believed that the scarred and bloodied girl tied up on the floor in the banquet hall was a saint? Unlikely. This was no charitable gathering, but an unholy Sabbath. Perhaps it was caused by my corrupted spirit. Perhaps it was my heart's way of crying for help. Or perhaps it was the devil giving me my witch's mark. But no matter what the cause, during one of the bloody banquets, I underwent a transformation. I was half conscious, as usual, when one of the guests pointed at me and shouted something. His face went pale as if he were afraid, which I found quite curious. The Lord then approached me, grabbing me by the hair and lifting my head. He yelled something, but I was too far gone to be able to make out what he was saying. So here's the diverging point. Morgana wishes retribution on sinners while Jesus sought to forgive sins. Suddenly, I found myself released from my bonds. But my body had grown so weak from being tied up for so long, I didn't have the strength to hold myself up, and so I collapsed to the floor. I was still trying to figure out what was happening when the Lord drew a sword, raising it high above his head. His words in that moment reached me with perfect clarity. "You're a damned witch wearing a saint's skin." A witch? Why was he calling me a witch? I was the holy daughter of God. I had certainly never made a pact with the devil. What could have given him that idea? What was in store for me now? Had God performed some kind of miracle for him? Dozens of thoughts and questions floated through my mind as death hung over me. I couldn't comprehend anything, and so I didn't feel any fear or anger at my impending death. I was simply curious. What had happened to me? But before I had a chance to find that answer, the Lord swung down his blade. Without warning, without any time to prepare, the darkness drains away. And a second later, I crash into the stairs. Hard. Right at my ear, I can hear the of the river of blood. The world fades in and out of view, giving way to very real images of a past I never lived. I can practically feel the fire in the eyes of that Mad Blood's banquet's guests. My vision distorts. I can't regain my focus. Whose blood is this streaming down the stairs? Oh, that. I wonder. Okay, I get the blood streaming down the stairs now. Is it hers? Is it mine? Who am I? A saint? A witch? Is what I'm seeing through a lens of clarity or madness? Wait, no, no. I am not her. I am Michael. No one else. It hurts, doesn't it? It's hard to breathe. Your chest is on fire. Your vision is blurry. It's dark. It's lonely. It's scary. It's frustrating. It's disheartening. It's exasperating. Isn't it? What you're feeling is exactly the pain I felt. Uh, uh, uh. I reach my hand out in a plea for help, which is when I see something I can hardly believe. Well, she did say we were going to undergo a change with her, so. Both of my arms are covered in gashes, blood flowing from them without end. The raw flesh beneath my skin has been exposed to the open air. Uh, uh, uh. All I can bring myself to do is scream. That pain, her horrible past, is doing everything in its power to break me. That 9-year-old girl's sickening experiences are twisting and constricting and crushing me. Why is this happening to you? Are you really that slow, my dear? You're empathizing with my pain. You're just that kind hearted, Michael. Uh, ugh. You said you wouldn't give up, didn't you? That you would make your way to me. Then surely this won't be enough to do you in. Uh, of course it won't. Mustering up every last bit of strength I can, I begin crawling up the stairs. The red river beats against my open wounds, stinging painfully. The simple act of lifting an arm or a leg is almost unbearably agonizing. The blood dripping from my lacerated arms mixes with the blood already soaking the tower. So this is the pain Morgana suffered? Ugh. Do you despise everyone, Morgana? Did your resentment at your mother's betrayal, at the people who came seeking your blood, at the Lord who took your life, turn it into a hatred for all mankind? Hmm. Your perception of me is still incorrect, Michael. My grudge is only against a select few. Think about it, my dear. Of the thousands, millions, billions of people living on this planet, my world is comprised of but a minuscule fraction of that. Hatred for all mankind? No. What I feel is not nearly so nebulous. Although, if I had died, still believing I was a saint, maybe I wouldn't have such a well defined mission. Are you saying the Lord didn't kill you? Oh my, did you actually think that was the end of my tale? Despite all your big talk, you're afraid of having to suffer through any more of that, aren't you? But you're the one who said you wouldn't give in. So, go on. Know my pain. Without losing your mind. Once again, my surroundings crumble. I have no say. I have no chance to object before I'm dragged back to that repulsive banquet. I reach out, stretching my hand as far as it will reach, but all I can grab is darkness. My bloody body sinks back into the abyss. The pain becomes more than just a memory, eroding away at my consciousness. We can handle this. We will save Giselle, but also, I don't know, I'm feeling kind of bad for her at the moment. Like, she was a 9-year-old. She didn't deserve this. Is she just lonely? Like, we can be friends. We can all be friends, right? You're a damned witch wearing a saint's skin. Maybe if I had died then, I wouldn't have become the witch you know now. But that's all conjecture. Theorizing about what could have happened is an exercise in futility. But no, I did not die that day. Brought together by constant mistreatment, the Lord's slaves chose that moment to start their revolt. When he swung down his blade, someone bumped into him and it was knocked off its course. I didn't have the strength to get to my feet, so I simply watched the chaos unfold before my hazy eyes. It never even occurred to me that I should try to escape. At some point during the riot, a young man, one of the slaves, grabbed me by my bloody, limp arm and led me out of the Lord's manor. Exactly, Morgana. Do you want to team up? Like, we can become besties here. Like, you can be a witch. I really don't have any special skills, but we can be friends, right? The young man brought me to a slum, a place where the people banded together in their hardship, barely scraping together enough to eat every day, let alone pay the taxes demanded of them. By the time we had arrived at a small brothel located a ways into the slum, the fog was starting to clear from my mind. I knew where we were, and feeling the gazes of those scantily clothed women, I trembled. In a sense, that was possibly the most frightened I had ever been in my life, despite everything else I had been through. The idea that I had fallen so far I would have to become a prostitute scared me to death. Our skill is painting. Huh. After all, I was a saint, and saints were supposed to retain their purity. Wasn't. Uh, Granted, I only know this because of the Da Vinci Code, which I've read a couple of times. Wasn't Mary Magdalene? Is this a Mary Magdalene reference? Like, wasn't she supposedly a prostitute? Spreading my legs for any man who gave me enough coins would shatter my very identity. As all that was going through my mind, I probably shouted no in protest, because the slave gave me an exasperated look and told me he hadn't brought me here to become a prostitute. He said he knew someone here, someone I could trust, and that she would give me a room. I had trouble believing him, though. I couldn't trust the word of a prostitute, someone who valued money more than her own body. It was all a trap, I was sure. One day they would tell me I had to work. Nothing he said would convince me otherwise. Apparently, sensing my mistrust, the slave gave me an apologetic frown and handed me a mirror, saying, "Even if I did, you couldn't get any work looking like that." I could not believe what I saw. That couldn't be my face. It had to be an illusion. There was no way. That was not the face of a saint. It couldn't be. It wasn't real. It wasn't possible. Patches of skin had fallen off my face, exposing the raw, red flesh beneath. It looked quite similar to what had been done to my arms and legs, except my face had never been cut before. Looking at myself in the mirror, even I doubted my own sainthood. The thing in my reflection was a hellish abomination. It was the twisted face of a witch. And although I was shocked by what I saw, at the same time, it answered several lingering questions. It explained why the Lord and his guests had panicked at the sight of me, and it also explained why he had said I was a witch wearing a saint's skin. Over the course of the dozens of banquets I had participated in, my face must have mutated, twisted into this ugly, sickening, monstrous thing. Interesting. So the concept of Mary Magdalene as a prostitute came from Pope Gregory I in the year 591. Interesting. The sight of what I had become sapped the last bit of willpower from me. Not because I was particularly fond of my face or thought myself especially beautiful, but because it crushed me to see everything saintly about me crumble away. Tests from God or otherwise, I didn't have the strength left to attempt to overcome it. Deciding I would rather be dead than struggle any longer, I begged the slave to kill me. Taking one's own life was a sin. If I did that, I would not be able to return to my father's side, and I wanted to ask him why I had been put through such tribulation. But the young man refused. He said, completely missing my intention, that if I persevered, good fortune would eventually find me. He said that if I lived on, I would eventually have a chance to get my payback. I had no such worldly concerns, though, but if no one would take my life, I had no choice but to live. I despised life at the brothel. The men who came to buy their services were disgusting buffoons, the kind of people who would think that they could deceive God. And the women fawning over them were just as repulsive. That said, I had nowhere else to go, which meant that I was forced to suffer that sickening place. Girl, I get that you're like 9, so there's not really a lot you could do anyways, but also these people have taken you in and are taking care of you and keeping you safe. Like, get some perspective. So in the canonical Gospels, Mary Magdalene is named as a witness to the crucifixion and the empty tomb following the resurrection. Yeah, all I know of her is from the Da Vinci Code, which doesn't go into that. But by the time a year or so had passed, my feelings about it had changed. The women of the brothel took good care of me, treating me like a sister. At first, it was just irritating. I was a saint, and how could a saint have prostitutes for sisters? But over time, I got to know them better, grew to appreciate their circumstances and hardships. Despite barely having enough money to keep food on the table, whenever they had a little to spare, they would use it to purchase medicine, ointments to apply to my arms, legs, and face. And as a result of their generosity, my arms and legs started looking almost human. But nothing had any effect on my face. Occasionally, the slave would drop in to check on me. The other men thought me ghastly and wouldn't get anywhere near me, but he was different. And every time he visited, he would say, "One day I'll show you the world." And to tell you the truth, I was beginning to grow attached to it all. My time at the brothel was probably, all things considered, one of the brighter chapters of my life. There, I was neither saint nor witch, but an ordinary human girl. Hmm. Saint Nicholas is, among other things, the patron saint of prostitutes. Is that like Saint Nicholas? Is that Santa Claus? I feel stupid asking that. Um, for the first time, I felt like my life had meaning beyond my assumed divine purpose. I was even beginning to feel kind of happy. And with each passing day, my intractable worldview was gaining a little flexibility. Perhaps I could perform miracles, but that didn't necessarily mean I had to be the daughter of God or a saint. Maybe I was just a regular person who happened to possess some unusual abilities. Ridiculous, isn't it? Despite coming to accept my humanity, I refused to let go of my miraculous powers. They were the last thing protecting me of what I thought of as myself. But to me at the time, it felt like a very dramatic change of heart. 3 years after the revolt at the Lord's Manor, I had my 12th birthday, for which they threw me a little dinner party. Oh, that's cute. The women all pitched in to bake me treats, and the young slave man was there too. I was happy. I thought that if life could continue on like this, I was fine with not going back to being a saint. Okay, so the very first gifts of Saint Nick that inspired the gift giving legend of Santa Claus were bags of gold coins, which he gave to impoverished families that would have had to sell their daughters into prostitution otherwise. Oh, that's nice of him. But for some reason, for some reason, happiness always seems to slip away as soon as you've got your hands around it. No one sincerely wants to lose it, so why must they? I certainly didn't mind not being miserable. Let me tell you what happened that night. On the night of my birthday celebration, bandits attacked the brothel. Now, bandits were hardly a rarity in that time, so everyone was always on the lookout, and we never went out at night. They wouldn't stop at robbing you either. They were armed with blades and would frequently kill their targets if necessary. But cautious as we were helpless against a direct raid. The brothel fell into a panic, screams echoing in the night. The customers were carved up and left for dead. The women were bound and stowed away to be sold. My peaceful world shattered in an instant. And the next thing I knew, I was some slave trader's merchandise. I don't know what became of the prostitutes who cared for me, or the slave who brought me to them. I assume the women were sold and the young man slaughtered. But regardless, I found myself being rocked around in the back of a carriage once more. The carriage was packed so tight you could barely see the floor, and it smelled like death. Sweat, urine, feces, every foul odor imaginable compressed into a tiny space. There were both men and women in there, nearly all of them muttering or groaning or weeping. Everyone was young, ripe to be put to work. It didn't take me long to realize what fate awaited these people, and me. And when I did, I just sat there in silence. Then, for the first time, I cried. I was experiencing, I believe, a very human emotion. I was sad, hurt that I had been taken away from a place where I was happy, from the women at the brothel and that young man. It crushed me. And no longer did I wonder why such a thing was happening to the holy daughter of God. Something about my tears must have seemed strange to him, because one man saw me and said, "Why are you crying?" He was a curious man. To start, he looked very different from anyone else. The color of his skin, the length of his nose, the shape of his eyes. Everything about him was new and unusual. Hesitantly, I replied, "I'm sad because I didn't get the chance to show my gratitude to the people very dear to me." The man fell silent, looking as though he was deep in thought. I had no idea why he had asked me that, but something about him made me feel uncomfortable, so I couldn't bring myself to ask. Several hours later, the man suddenly stood up. The guards had no patience for anyone stepping out of line, and they didn't look like they would hesitate to kill us either. So, unsurprisingly, one at the back of the carriage drew his sword and pointed it at the man. What was surprising, though, was what happened next. The man, his hands shackled like the rest of us, leapt for the guard, slamming his fists into his face and stealing his sword. The entire carriage was in shock. The guards were too stunned to effectively react, so they were quickly cut down. And because the one man uprising had taken place between cities, there was no one the slave traders could ask for help before they were slaughtered. In the blink of an eye, it was all over, and there was nothing human about what I had witnessed. If I had to describe it, I would say it was as though a wild beast had attacked. The man ruffled through the slave trader's clothes until he found the keys, which he brought to me, ordering I unshackle him. So, okay, I'm making some inferences here, connecting the dots. I'm not connecting shit. But so we have a young man, we have a lord in a rose garden, or a lord in a garden of flowers. This stream is giving you the urge to go online and buy that Bible spoilers t-shirt. I like it. There's a lot of Bible spoilers in here. Anyway, so we have a lord with flowers. That seems like Mel. We have this guy who has been compared to a wild beast, which would be Yukimasa, possibly. I'm connecting dots here. Again, I'm not connecting shit, but I'm connecting the dots. I've connected them. The man ruffled through the slave trader's clothes until he found the keys, which he brought to me, ordering I unshackle him. And so I did as he commanded. Once they had had enough time to process what had happened, the would-be slaves applauded. Their wretched souls had been saved. And for a moment, I believed so too. When the man's hands were freed, he rolled his shoulders a couple of times, made sure everything was in place, and then he began his massacre. Oh, well, yeah, he was also a thief and a brutal torturer. We may be pretty close to seeing both. Screams of agony filled the carriage as he ran his sword through the helpless men and women packed inside it. Blood and guts were splattered against every surface, and those who tried to escape did not get far before being mercilessly skewered. It was like a scene out of a nightmare. I was frozen in place, not out of fear, but because my mind had shut down. I couldn't make sense of what was happening, so my mind rejected it. And with my brain having given up, my body was no more than a lifeless puppet. Oh, more blood, way more blood this time. In short order, all the slaves were dead, and I was sitting in a pool of blood staring at the man. He pointed his blade at me and with a little smirk said, "Why didn't you run?" In turn, I asked him, "Why did you kill them?" The smile vanished from his face, and after a few quiet moments of pondering, he replied, "Because I felt like it." "And why haven't you killed me yet?" I asked. To which he gave a curt, "I don't know," then withdrew his blade and wandered off into the distance. And then I was all alone, surrounded by corpses. I glanced down, and half of someone's face was looking back up at me. Wrapped in absolute darkness, warm blood spills onto my cheeks, my hair, my skin. Chunks of human flesh rain down upon me. Make it stop! Pitter patter, pitter patter. There's no end to the deluge. The smell of death fills the air. I'm struck with a wave of nausea so strong I can't hold back the contents of my stomach. But when my mouth opens to vomit, blood pours into it. Oh. Yeah, the squishing sound was bad, but this mental mm-mm, mm-mm. Ugh. Let go of me. Dead bodies grab at my ankles, dragging me down. To where? Hell? Or to the mountain of corpses? Now do you understand that there was a time, if but briefly, when I was happy, when I felt human emotions? But I wish I never had. If I had remained confined in my daughter of God shell, then I doubt I would have felt so much terror at the sight of death. I can't say anything in response. I can't form words. I feel what she experienced, the massacre she witnessed, the limp flesh piling up around her. Even more than twice her age, it's enough to drive me mad. The fact that the fact that a 12-year-old girl had to experience something so unspeakable devastates me. Tell me, my dear, do you pity me? Do you sympathize with me? If you feel bad for me, then you'll remain with me. You'll feel my pain and my despair with me, won't you? D- The witch's cackle echoes through the pile of bodies. There's not a speck of light, and hideous death lingers everywhere. Helpless to resist, I'm dragged down into a deep, dark ocean, an ocean of blood. We're with you, Morgana. Exactly. It still doesn't excuse you messing with Giselle, but we can negotiate. So, now, on with the story. I was at a complete loss for some time after that. I didn't want to return to the city because I knew there was no one left who would take me in. There was only the Lord who had bound me and drained me of my blood. So I wandered the roads, no destination in mind, and nothing to defend myself but the clothes on my back. Frankly, I'm rather surprised I wasn't attacked by bandits. After walking for days without food or water, my mind was hazy and my exhaustion at a peak. In the distance, I saw a lake. So driven by my thirst, I turned my unsteady feet toward the water, not caring that it took me off the main road. And it turned out that was the correct choice, because there was a small cottage beside the lake, smoke rising from the chimney, telling me it wasn't abandoned. Out of sheer desperation, I knocked on the door. No one answered. The door wasn't locked, so I slowly, hesitantly pushed it open. And beyond it, I found an old woman sitting dead in a chair. The woman was a witch, by trade, that is. It appeared she had a deep knowledge of medicinal herbs, using it to make an assortment of medicines. In her cabinets were dozens of small glass bottles containing dried powdered leaves and crushed berries, among other things. On the fire was a cauldron, liquid bubbling inside. The woman looked as though she was asleep. Presumably, she'd passed away of old age, for there was no sign bandits had been rooting through the cottage, and she had a look of absolute serenity on her face. Looking over at the woman's dead body, I didn't cross myself. I envied her. Dragging the woman's body by her feet, I dumped her into the lake. Girl, you just polluted your entire water supply. You probably should not have done that. Do you think doing so makes me a bad person? Makes me unsaintly? Well, I didn't have anywhere else to go, and the owner of the cozy cottage was no longer of this world. There was no reason I couldn't fill the home in her stead, was there? I deserved to have somewhere I felt comfortable, after everything I'd been through, didn't I? And so I took up residence in the old witch's cottage, and remained there until my 16th year. By 16, a terrible cynicism had taken root in my heart. I had no trust for people. I shut them out, building high walls around myself. After such a tumultuous, bloody childhood, it was all I could do to protect myself, to keep my young spirit from cracking. Nevertheless, travelers would, on occasion, pay the old witch's cottage a visit, seeking her medicines. Whenever someone arrived, I would cautiously crack the door open, telling them they could trade for whatever they wanted with food, and never showing my face. One day, a young man showed up at the cottage. That's fair. Like, she was 12 in the distant past. She probably has little concept of contamination like that, but I don't know how she lived to the age of 16. My sister has fallen very ill, and she desperately needs medicine. He was very soft spoken. There was a distinct kindness in his voice, which I thought unusual. Curious. Oh, wait. I wonder if maybe it's swapped. So, like, the Lord who only cared about other people's appearances, I wonder, maybe that's Jacopo and this is Mel? Maybe? What kind of person could he be? What did he look like? What expressions did he make as he spoke? To satisfy that curiosity, I snuck a peek at him through a crack in the door. He was a handsome young man with flowing flaxen hair. Okay, yeah, this seems more like Mel. And upon seeing me, he didn't flinch back in disgust. He smiled. According to him, his younger sister had fallen gravely ill, and though they had tried a number of remedies, she was still bedridden. The medicines I gave him, too, had no effect, but he persisted in his quest, visiting me again and again for new combinations to try. He wanted nothing more than to relieve even the slightest bit of his sister's suffering. And, moved by his dedication to his family, I too wanted to do anything I could to help. For the first time in years, my world encompassed more than just my small cottage. When the young man came, he would ask not only for medicine, but go on walks with me. He volunteered to spend time with me, despite my horrifying appearance. It's not healthy to stay holed up inside all the time. Have you considered true love's kiss? Lady, that's my sister. Um, you've got this beautiful lake right here. What do you say we take a little walk around the shoreline? He said with a smile, taking me by the hand. We spoke as we circled the lakeside. His voice was always soft and pleasant, like a ray of light shining through a crack in the walls. When I was with him, I felt like I could be an actual person, an ordinary girl. He talked about his sister more than anything, and whenever he did, he was at his brightest and most melancholy. The young man had been a member of a noble house, but disputes over who was the rightful heir had forced him and his sister out. Shortly after that, his sister had fallen ill and was now bedridden. I'll take anything at this point to make her better. I'll even take a miracle if I can get one. That word, muttered beneath his breath, sparked my memory. I was a saint. My blood had healing properties. I had no reason to hesitate. Someone needed my help, and who deserved it more than this kind-hearted young man's sister? So I decided to tell him what I really was, that my blood had miraculous powers, that it had saved people, that the moment I had been born, the drought plaguing my village had come to an end, that I had been known as a saint, the daughter of God. I told him everything, and he believed it all. He led me to his house, where a pale, sickly young girl lay in bed. Was a sweet little girl with the same flaxen hair as her brother, who looked like she would have been quite spirited if not for her ailment. It was touching to see the two siblings sitting there together, quietly holding each other. I would gladly give my blood for the two of them. And so I made a new cut on my arm, which had healed considerably thanks to the slave and the women of the brothel, and let the girl drink of my blood. Neither of them had any doubts about my sainthood, and because they believed, a miracle occurred. The flaxen haired girl recovered enough to get out of her bed. I was extremely proud of myself. I felt like, for once, I had actually saved someone's life. The only issue was she didn't make a complete recovery. For a few days after drinking my blood, she was in good health, but her condition quickly regressed. I was deeply perplexed by this. A miracle had undoubtedly taken place, but it was only temporary. Now, though, I believe I can explain what happened. Her recovery was nothing more than a placebo effect caused by her faith. But that's something I couldn't have known at the time. We were all three perplexed, and we were all three disheartened. Nevertheless, I was prepared to give her my blood as many times as needed. Whenever her condition worsened, the young man came to request more, and never once did I turn him away. On the contrary, I enthusiastically offered her my services. Over time, though, the hope in his eyes began to fade. He asked me on fewer walks, and he seemed hesitant to look me in the eye. I assume it was out of discomfort, out of guilt, out of shame about asking for blood. But I don't think his concerns were for me, rather himself and his sister. As I mentioned earlier, blood was considered unclean in our time. And not only was I giving mine away, I was having his sister imbibe it. Looking at it that way, it would hardly be a surprise for him or anyone else to think what I was doing depraved. As time passed, the flaxen haired young man seemed to grow more and more disturbed by me. That was what I got for opening up. That was what I got for letting his kind, warm light shine in on me. The moment things went bad, he pulled away. There were times when I thought I shouldn't have done anything in the first place, but regardless, I held fast to my original decision. I would put myself on the line for them. No one else, just them. Even if he was afraid of me or had no interest in seeing me, I would continue offering her my blood. And I was firm in my resolve. One day, though, I received a new visitor. The young man was still the only one I would show my face to, the only guest I had let into my walls. So, as usual, I took the man's request from behind the cottage door. But I could hardly believe my ears when he began speaking. Are you the witch with the miracle blood? First, how did he know my blood had powers? Second, why had he called me a witch and not a saint? Third, why did he sound like the man who had slaughtered the slave carriage? I told the man he had to leave, that I would not be opening the door for any reason. In response, he said, I am in need of your blood. Could you not spare a little? My blood was for the sick and needy. I would never spare a drop for a murderer like him. And I told the man exactly that, demanding he leave. All I could think about was the pile of bodies, the fountain of blood. The man drenched in crimson, wearing a ghastly smirk. I trembled behind the door, fearing he may go on another such rampage. But instead, he gave a simple, as you say, and went on his way. I let out a deep sigh of relief, which is when I realized that tears were rolling down both of my cheeks, like an ordinary girl. 3 days later, the flaxen haired boy showed up at my cottage. I'm sorry for being so distant lately. I want to talk things over. Those 2 sentences were like a light shining from above. I wanted to talk to him too. I wanted to take a walk around the lake and listen to him talk about nothing. I wanted to experience the warmth of his world once more. And I wanted to tell him about the terrible man who had been there a few days earlier, about how scared I had been. I wanted him to tell me that it would be all right. I want to talk to you too, I said, opening the door without a second thought. Oh no. Oh no. Girl. The light of the sun was so bright, all I could make out was his silhouette. I couldn't see the look on his face, or the look in his eyes. A gentle breeze blew past, and my mind froze. How could this be happening? What did it mean? Interesting. Is her patient's condition somehow linked to her own health? It's a possibility. Like, yeah, I can see it. Why? How? What was that man doing? Standing behind him? Why was he carrying a sword? Why was he coming into my house? Why did he swing it down, severing my arm? Oh no. I was in a daze. I couldn't make sense of anything. I didn't want to. My left arm fell to the floor before I even knew what was happening, and then my legs gave out. The pain, searing and unbearable, came a few moments later, as I was lying in an ever-expanding pool of my own blood. I did something then that I hadn't done before, that I had resisted doing no matter how much blood the Lord had stolen from me. I screamed. It was a hideous, visceral noise, a sound I had never thought a saint could make. The same ear-splitting howl the slaves had made as the man had butchered them. I writhed, I wailed, I wept, I crawled across the floor through my own blood. I begged and I begged and I begged for my life. The man walked over and picked up my severed arm, and then, shockingly, he tossed it to the kind-hearted young man, after which he said, That's your share. Should last you long enough. Share? What did he mean by share? What was he talking about? Why had he just given him my arm? And why had he taken it? Why was he talking like they knew each other? Why? Why? I had spared blood for him when he asked, hadn't I? So why was he doing this? Was cutting my arm off and stealing it easier on his conscience than simply asking? You understand how I felt, don't you? You can put yourself in my shoes, can't you? The young man refused to look me in the eye. Holding my bloody arm in his trembling hands, he fled from the cottage as quickly as his legs would allow. The man then walked over and picked me up. I had neither the strength nor willpower to resist. Holding me in his arms, he began to speak, telling me things I didn't want to know, things I didn't want to hear, but he didn't care. Nothing personal. I just needed her blood. Without it, she'll lose her church. Don't take it personally. Tell me, is there anyone in this world who wouldn't feel a bit of spite after being put through such torture? Bible brain rot is making you just wait for her to reattach her arm instead of processing this scene properly. I mean, I think Mel has taken her arm at this point, so she's gonna have a little bit of time to reattach, a little bit of a journey before she can reattach it. I think. How was I supposed to let that slide? No one's that much of a saint. My trust had been betrayed, and I was supposed to turn the other cheek? A man had barged into my home uninvited and cut off my arm, and I was supposed to smile and take it? Is there anyone, anywhere, who doesn't feel even the slightest bit of hatred ever? Is there anyone in this world who could just laugh and brush off this level of abuse? Tell me, is there? How could I not hold a grudge? How could I not despise them? How could I possibly forgive them? Tell me, please. Tell me, how could I? She needs the money. I needed a way to I needed a way of getting enough money to keep her church running. So the Lord made me an offer. If I brought him the witch with the miracle blood, he would finance a whole new church for her. The Lord? Why him again? Why couldn't he leave me alone? After trying to kill me during one of his blood Sabbats, why was he after my blood once more? Had he learned it really did have miraculous powers and decided he wanted me back? You get to be the sacrifice. To keep her church from collapsing. To keep her world from collapsing. Sacrifice? Excuse me, what? And what's all this about keeping her church from collapsing? You murdered a carriage full of innocent people, and you're trying to protect a church? You? Are you out of your mind? Yeah, slaps the head of a child. This baby can fit so much healing blood. Oh. Churches are where people go to commune with God, to speak with my Father. How dare you soil those sanctified grounds with your filthy hands, you beast? It's insulting, sacrilegious, repulsive. Just what do you think we are? So don't take it personally, witch. I... I... I'm... I'm not a witch. I'm a saint. I was a saint. My blood exists to do the Lord's work, not to satisfy the avarice of men. Why is this happening to me? The man brought me back to the city, but instead of taking me to the Lord's manor, he brought me to a church on the city's outskirts. Though, to be honest, it looked more like an estate than a church. The church also served as a hospital, offering free care to less fortunate children, the poor, and the infirm. That was when I learned why he had said that they needed money. The owner of the church offered unconditional assistance to anyone who came. Even when food and supplies ran low, they would ration their own in order to keep helping others. As a result, the church was perpetually on the verge of collapse. The church was run by a woman, something exceedingly rare for the time. There were no priests. All management was handled by a single nun, who everyone referred to as the saintess. I was the saint. Why was this woman, who didn't have the ability to perform miracles, being worshipped like she did? Why did the people of the city idolize her? Why were their smiles all directed at her? Why was I not in her place? The man carried me to the top of the observation tower. It was there that I had my reunion with the Lord. As we all know, there can only be one saint at a time. You can have your turn after she's done. Mom said it's my turn to have the sainthood. I was to spill my blood for the people of the city, but also for the Lord's prophet. He was not offering free aid, but selling it as medicine. He claimed it was a miracle elixir, telling no one that it was actually my blood. It was mixed with a beautiful red wine, and drinking it would cure you of any ailment. If they knew it was actually the blood of a witch, they would think it unclean. They would fear it. I remained imprisoned for a long, long time. In the beginning, the swordsman guarded me, though before long the flaxen haired young man showed up as well. Presumably, one severed arm wasn't enough to keep his sister healthy for long. In listening to their conversations, I learned that to ensure no one else could get in, the observation tower was sealed with 3 locks. The Lord, the swordsman, and the young man each held one of the keys. I was their secret, locked away in the tower for them to drain of blood away from wandering eyes. So she's literally recreated her own prison. This is fucked up. Um, Time went on, and I grew progressively weaker. I lost the will to eat and the will to live. My only view from the tower was the clouds through a window high up on the wall. Occasionally, a pigeon would fly in, sometimes a butterfly, and I would glare in envy as it fluttered around, free to come and go as it pleased. And soon it was spring. Every spring, the church held a festival to pray for the coming year's harvest and the people's well being. I could hear the bustle from far below through the window as everyone rushed to prepare. I heard the flaxen haired girl's voice, who had regained her health drinking my blood. I heard her brother's voice, who had betrayed me. I heard the nun's voice, who played saint in my stead. I heard the barbaric swordsman's voice, who had chopped off my arm. And I heard the Lord's voice, the root of all my suffering. Yeah, girl, you made all of them suffer, if I'm being completely honest. Like, flaxen-haired girl, we had Nellie. Mel is the brother. The nun must be Pauline. And the barbaric swordsman is Yukimasa. This whole story is an extended tragic version of the goose that lays golden eggs. Interesting. I heard people painting the saintess, though I, the true saint, was locked in the tower. I heard people thanking the Lord for his generous donations and miracle medicine, though it had all come from me. Propped up on my suffering, they cheered and clinked glasses of my bloody wine. Those merry, peaceful, cheerful, spirited sinners' voices resounded in my tower. And at noon on the day of the festival, the church bell tolled. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and with the 12th chime, I died. As the bell's last pealing faded into silence, the tower door swung open. Standing on the other side of it were the 3 men. They must have wanted to drain a little more from me to use in the feast, but they arrived at the worst possible moment. The flaxen-haired young man was the first to express his consternation. Why, I never wanted her to die. Was she not eating? The Lord gave my corpse a casual glance and said stone-faced, "Seal the tower off. Understood? No one finds out about this." How can you be so calm? Do you understand what you've done? Pinning the blame on me? How nice it must be to be able to distort reality with panic. The swordsman, who had been silently observing the Lord and the boy conversing, interjected, "You're just as guilty as any of us." Not only did they not mourn my death, they argued over whose fault it was. There was no regret, no remorse. The young man muttered absent-mindedly, I never wanted her to die." What did his intentions matter, though? It was his betrayal that had ultimately tethered me to this mansion. But the fact that they didn't grieve my death, and instead squabbled amongst themselves like filthy rats, was the final straw. How could I not despise them? I don't believe I actually had the power to perform miracles when I was alive. It was all faith, the illusion of belief. I was neither a saint nor a witch. The blood wine was only effective because people placed their faith in the other saintess. I was only ever human. But then, in that moment, an actual miracle occurred. My father bestowed upon me his power. Or perhaps it was the devil who lent me his strength. I was looking down upon my own dead body, my own wretched self. There was nothing beautiful about the pile of bones I had become. I could almost smell the rotting flesh. That was once a saint? I laughed at the thought. It was absurd, ridiculous, and infuriating. They would pay. Those who had cast me into this hell, who had mocked me, who had done this to me, who had made a witch out of me. Hatred coursed through me, revulsion at everyone on these grounds still smiling. They would know just whose dead shoulders their little party was resting upon. If they wanted so badly to call me a witch, then a witch I would be. I would kill them, every last one of them. Place a curse on their souls. And so I made my wish. Most people might consider it a curse, but to me it was most certainly a wish. And my father, or perhaps the devil, granted that wish. From the garden, there rose a scream. The flaxen-haired young man knew that voice better than anyone. He went deathly pale, darting down the spiral staircase until he reached a window. A young girl was on her knees, vomiting blood in the grass. The young man let out a yelp as he descended the remainder of the staircase. As soon as he reached the garden, he lifted the girl in his arms, but she had already perished. Realizing this, he cried to the heavens, saying the one thing he should have kept to himself. The witch killed her. The blood of the witch killed my sister. That wine you're drinking is no medicine. It's the blood of the witch. You're all drinking witch blood. Look, that would have been so much more fun if they had a James Bond one-liner of "you can't be a saint until you've died." Look, now we're a saint. Now we've died. Crushed by the loss of his only family, the young man picked up a silver fork and plunged it into his own throat, ending his life. Naturally, there was an uproar. Goblets of wine crashed against the earth in rapid succession, as the people holding them fell to the ground and vomited or convulsed. The nun was the first target of their outrage. What she had claimed to be medicine had turned out to be blood, an unclean substance, the blood of a witch, no less. A servant of the church, a servant of the Lord, had given her followers blood to drink. And at this, their indignation surged uncontrollably. The people surrounded her, tying her up and throwing her to the ground. As they prepared to inflict righteous justice upon her, the swordsman soared down the stairs and into the garden, plunging his blade into anyone standing near the nun. The cries of agony ringing through the church grounds were ear-splitting. It was no longer a place of God, but hell on earth. Hell built up by the hands of man. Hell painted red with the blood of their brothers. It's really interesting to me that if you think about like how this happens in comparison to the Doors, so like Mel does everything for Nellie in this, whereas in the first Door he basically betrays her and turns his back on her. And then the same thing happens with Yukimasa and Pauline, where the swordsman is protecting her, and Yukimasa ended up killing Pauline. So it's like a whole entire reversal here. The people armed themselves with anything they could find and went after the man. As much of a beast as he may have been, he stood little chance against such numbers. It is the fate of a beast to be exterminated by those he terrorizes. And once he was gone, the nun had no one left to protect her. She too was consumed by their frenzy. All that remained was an inextinguishable inferno. Hysteria and despair, madness and outrage, and no outlet for it. It was a revolt that made the slaves' uprising at the Lord's Manor look like a game. Eventually, their rage found a new target: the Lord. Apparently, look, I've had really shit wine, so it is possible that it was such bad wine that it overtook the taste of the blood because the wine was basically like vinegar. But that's only a guess. These people are also buying supposedly miracle potions, so, the IQ can't be that high. It was only natural, for he was the true villain. He was the one who had given money and the witch's blood to the church. He was the one who had profited off of it. And above all, people often resented those who stood above them, particularly in times of unrest. The city resounded with cries for the Lord's head, and he looked down upon it all from the safety of the observation tower. He could do nothing but watch as his domain burned. I can only imagine how painful that must have been. See, and this is another reversal because in Jacopo's story, he loses Abby, but keeps his wealth and his status and his home. Whereas in this one, he seems to lose all of that, and he has no Abby, so can't lose her. Capitalism strikes once again. But before long, having seemingly have made his peace, he began descending the spiral staircase. He opened the door at the bottom, revealing himself to his people. But before the door had swung open all the way, before he had a chance to say his final words, someone ran a blade through his chest. With that, the raging furor mostly settled down, but it was hardly the end of the destruction. Mere days later, a plague befell the city. Dreadful black spots covered the flesh of the infected. They writhed in pain, screaming and vomiting blood. Ghastly howls echoed through the streets, as though the whole city had been possessed. It became a cursed land. In their diseased haze, the people muttered again and again, "We've been cursed by the witch." In less than a week, the entire city was dead. My body was left abandoned at the top of the observation tower. And as if to seal the curse away, in their final days, the people shuttered all the windows, wrapping the house in darkness. It's possible that was no miracle either. You can easily explain what happened to them. Locked away for so long in that dirty tower, maybe I caught some kind of disease. And then, when the people drank my blood, they too were infected. Hardly anything out of the ordinary about that. The first to die, the girl, had already been ill. Her body merely chose the worst possible time to yield to her ailment. That was all that had happened. Indeed, it was nothing more than a fluke, an improbable stroke of luck, an unbelievably unfortunate accident for the city and those three men, and an indescribably fortunate accident for myself. But I wished to believe it was a miracle. That even if my blood didn't have healing properties, and even if I wasn't a saint, my wish, my curse, was what caused that uprising. That was my miracle, granted to me by God or the devil. I choose to believe that, and that my miracle took on its true form thereafter. So is this the city Amidite colonized? Maybe. My curse had brought death upon the three men, but for whatever reason, my rancor was far from sated. They had died. So what? Death is but a transient agony. It's nothing compared to what I went through. So I made my next wish. I wished for their reconstruction. I wished eternal suffering on their souls. I wished to trap them in a never-ending cycle of pain and hatred. This was my wish for the flaxen-haired young man. He treasured his dear sister, and he desired a quiet life. So I wished for him to have just that. and I wished for his dearly beloved sister to love him more than anything in the world, for his world to be destroyed by love gone too far. This was my wish for the beast-like man. He was conscious of his tendency for violence, and he yearned to be more human. So I had his inner beast toned up just a little. I saw to it that he would never be human, so he would never have the peace he so desired. My wish for the Lord was more straightforward. He seemed to have great affection for wealth and authority, so I assured those were the only things he could ever have. Who needs love or friendship when you could be drowning in power? Once he had lost everything, his solitude would be his only companion. Wishes can come true, as long as you always hold fast, never stop wishing, never surrender. They can come true. Eternal suffering on all their souls. An endless cycle of reconstruction and unavoidable tragedy. Tell me, my dear, do you sympathize with me? Will you curse them with me? Will you take my hand and revile them with me? There we go. Death isn't good enough for them. First burning, then freezing, then a room where all the robots scream at you. Yeah, I ensured that he would steal all his wealth from his hot childhood friend, and then she pits his wife against him. Look, all I'm saying is that Abby would have been so much happier with Maria. Probably would have been a better lay too. So this time, when my body crashes into the tower's stairs, I'm unable to make a noise. The obstruction is less mental and more physical. The excruciating pain. Uh, it's so intense, I can't even eke out a scream. My vision is distorted. My mind thick with fog. I feel like I'll fall into a bottomless pit if I loosen the grip on my consciousness even slightly. Through the haze, I see my own severed left arm. Reflected in a pool of blood, I see my face, large chunks of flesh peeled off. Look at you, trying to crawl up the stairs like a worm. How pathetic. It's like I'm looking at my old self. I can barely form a coherent thought. I can't lament her inhuman fate, can't mourn for her, or be shocked by the revelation about the three men and her history with them. Pain. It fills every corner of my mind, every nook and cranny of my body. You've figured it out by now, haven't you, my dear? You'll never make it to me. It's not possible. But it's not your fault. It's not because you're weak. There's simply no one who can bear this pain. You're allowed to give up, to rest. There's nothing wrong with that. The pain, the crushing weight, it's miserable, isn't it? But all you have to do is turn back, and it'll all go away. The witch whispers her sweet temptations. You've put in a fine effort. There's no shame at all in throwing in the towel. Her voice is soft, gentle, pleasant, saccharine. Concede defeat. If I do, it'll all go away. The searing pain spreading from the stump of my left arm. The sensation of being perpetually drained of my blood. The miserable solitude of staring at a door that never opens. The laughter I can hear through the window. My miserable wailing and this maddening hatred. I can end it all. That's right, it will all be over. You have the power to make it stop. Make it all stop. No! I can't let that happen. No, I have to get her back at my side. I do anything to take her back, even if it means I end up at 1,000 tiny scraps of meat. I will not give up on her for any reason. You won't, will you? Oh, such beautiful resolve. Willing to sacrifice yourself to save the girl. Like a hero of legend. Or maybe a fairy tale prince? No. I'm no hero and I am no prince. I am a human, an ordinary man. I don't have any extraordinary potential. I'm not a courageous leader or a charismatic general. I'm just a regular man in love with a regular woman who refuses to lose her. I don't need any other accomplishments. Only that. That's all I need. Because I'm just a regular man. By one act of resistance, it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter how much you cut me up. Nothing changes what I have to do. I have to take her back and set her free of this mansion. Nothing else. And never will I back down on that. Arms or no, as long as I can move, I must push forward. I must make my way to the woman who waited for me for so long. Up, to the top of the tower. Forward. Ever forward. Ever onward. Dragging my bloody body, paying the pain no mind, I once more arrive at the top of the observation tower. I place my hand on the door, holding myself up with my lacerated right arm. Take a moment to catch my breath, then lift my head, gaze into the void, and shout her name. Morgana! I pity you. I truly do. You were a saint shackled with an unfathomable fate, and for that I am enraged. As I felt your pain, as I watched your life, I too felt a burning hatred for those 3 men. If you truly feel that way, then why can't you stay here with me? We're all dead anyway. We've reached our ends. Do you honestly think there's anything more for us? There isn't. The end is the end. So what do you say the 3 of us? Me, you, and Giselle? Torture the 3 of them and everyone they cared about. I love this, like, laissez-faire, yeah, let's just torture them, man. Morgana, we hated those men before we even learned your story. Like, I will say, she's giving us a decent offer. Like, they're awful people. The only problem is that I don't know that Giselle could put up with that for that long. Make them suffer here for all eternity. In this house. And that way, you and Giselle can be together forever, too. That's not an option. Why not? Because hatred only brings you pain. Oh, that's brilliant. You spouting stupid platitudes at me. I can't believe my ears. Save your nonsense moralizing about how hatred does you no good. I won't hear it. I'm doing just fine for myself, my dear. In fact, I've never been better. I feel wonderful. Did you think that would be enough to persuade me? Really? How disappointing. And here I thought that you understood me. Morgana, why don't you say what you really think? Go right on ahead, hate them as much as you want. But keep me and Giselle out of it. Why didn't you just say that? I do feel bad, truthfully. For all the time we spent together, never once did I ask about your life. I was so focused on myself. And in the end, I pushed you away. That you did. You wanted to be with Giselle, so you pushed me out. I wish I wish I had asked you sooner. It wouldn't have changed anything, though. One puny man knowing what I went through would hardly be enough to erase the loathing I bear. It would have turned out the same regardless. There was nothing you could have done for me. There is nothing. Still, I would like to apologize. Had I known what you carried in your heart, perhaps I could have chosen my words better. Instead of rejecting you, I could have chosen some other response. I cannot remain in this house, nor can I allow her to stay either. So I would like to apologize for both my past actions and my present. Well, in that case, open the door, Michael. I am. See, I keep thinking at the moment, like, okay, this is what she's been doing with us. But she's had Giselle all this time, too. How fucked up would it be if she was pitting us against each other? Right? If she was making us both go through the same thing, and Giselle isn't necessarily going to make it, right? Because she's already kind of broken from having to relive her actual past. Like, I have a bad feeling about this. I take another moment to catch my breath, and then I gather my strength into the hand on the door. Blood seeps from my fingertips, slowly trickling down the rough surface. Exactly, prisoner's dilemma. It reminds me of my death. I'm coming for you. I push open the door, praying that it will be the last, that beyond it lies light for Giselle, and if possible, that it might cast a bit of light on Morgana's heart as well. That's not the observation tower. What? However, why am I in my bedroom? What I find behind the door is the last thing I expect. Huh? As she appears from the shadows of my chambers, I can't conceal my surprise. Giselle? Is this another illusion, Morgana? No, it's not. I'm the real me. Sounds like something the fake you would also say, but... Thank you for coming all the way here for me. She's thanking me. So why isn't she smiling? That was very kind and courageous of you, Michael. I'm deeply moved you would have such compassion not only for her, but for someone like me. But do you know what else you are? You're a worm. What is it this time, Morgana? What do you say we pull back the curtain, my dear? What curtain? There's one detail that hasn't yet come to light. This isn't your first return to the mansion, is it? You've been back numerous times, each time not remembering her, and each time hurting her even more. What are you talking about? What am I talking about? Oh, you know good and well, my dear. Or do you honestly believe that all the other pieces were in their rightful places, and you alone were some exception? I never... Tell me, how was it? Living in so many different eras, not knowing who you were, and playing with all the different men? No, you're out of your mind. You make it sound like I was... Not like, my dear. You are the white-haired girl. So she actually... Michael actually was Abby, or Michelle. Enough. How could anyone possibly confuse me with her? I mean, like everyone did it, but okay. To tell you the truth, I couldn't see you as anyone else. Your white hair, red eyes, porcelain skin, and your name. Tell me, what about you isn't the same? We're not the same person. I saw the letter. What? The one you had hidden. No. And you didn't think that was worth mentioning? No, Giselle, I didn't mean. You're exactly right, my dear Giselle. He deceived you. He kept a very important secret from you. Despite showing up before you multiple times, he cast you aside again and again. No, no, that wasn't me. It wasn't. It all. It all makes sense now. Nothing you ever did was for me. Giselle, I, I. Go on, Giselle. Tell him exactly how you feel. Michael, don't. Please don't. Don't say it. Not that, please. I'm begging you. You're. Stop. Please don't, Giselle. Not actually. Please, don't say it. A man at all, are you? You were right. Holy crap, Chad. I think you've, like, called most of the things here. Uh, 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 you're disgusting. Come on, Giselle. I get that, like, you're from ye old 876 or whatever, but. Uh, 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 you're the only one it could have been, my dear. The only one who could have been the white haired girl. Yeah, but that's even hotter somehow. The next moment, my whole world comes tumbling down. I could have borne anything, losing my arm, having my face torn off, any amount of pain, I could have handled it. For you, I could have done it. But this, hearing those words coming from your mouth, being rejected by you, that I cannot. Those words, they bury me alive. And you're the one person I never wanted to hear them from. All right, I think we're going to end here for tonight. I think this is a good place. We're at like a cliffhanger because I have no idea what's going to happen. And we got through a lot tonight. Holy crap. Um, yeah. So next stream is. What is today? Today's Friday. So next stream is Sunday, 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. Trying to think if I have any announcements, but I don't believe I do. Nope. Nothing that I can think of. So come join us Sunday and enjoy. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for hanging out tonight. See you Sunday. Have a good night. Bye.